DND number 5, Angels in Jesus' Name. This is the last chapter, chapter 18, and the epilogue. Chapter 18. Loved them. Oh, how he loved his new family, every single one of those little girls and their mother, completely and unconditionally. They made him smile, they made him laugh, they even made him cry. They made him want to be a better man. His joy in having them gave him boundless energy, which he put toward pleasing them in every way, from piggyback rides to cooking dinner, from disciplining children to tickling tummies, and from long sleepy talks with his new wife to longer bouts of making love. One of the biggest and the most important change Keegan made in his life was daily prayer with his family and attending church. His faith began to grow, and as it did, he knew he would stay on this path because God filled his heart with joy and peace and wisdom, and there was no going back once he'd seen the light. Life was a pleasure, and he was grateful for every moment of every day. The Georgia Regional Office of Ameritech was open and running. Keegan's new subordinates, a skeleton crew sent by Jason to help man the new facility, were well trained, which didn't surprise Keegan at all. Jason provided the best to his agents. Also important to Keegan was the amount of respect his new men showed him. Keegan vowed to earn that respect. His focus now was to recruit from the new region and send the new recruits to Jason for the intense training. In March, back on the home front, Keegan had begun the building of their home on the rear of the old Winstead property. Chaz talked Keegan into doing a lot of the work himself, vowing to help him every step of the way. Keegan had been a little iffy on the project until Chaz and Lisa invited everyone over to their house in the woods that Chaz had built with his own hands. It was a work of art and had Keegan ready to dive in. The new Tanner house was only about 100 yards from the front cottage they'd been living in, which made it easy to work on early in the mornings before work and late in the evenings after work. There were 8 cottages heading back, running parallel to the rear grounds of the inn. The house was just beyond that last cottage. There was a long drive that led to the house. The cottages were on the left side of the drive, and then there was a large front yard, and the house, and an even larger backyard. Several times Keegan had complained to Chaz that the work would already be done had they hired contractors to do it, but in actuality he appreciated the feeling of doing it himself, of building a home for his family with his own bare hands. He'd worked He'd worried, though, that he wouldn't be finished before the baby came. However, his worries had been unfounded. Chaz and John and several others in the close-knit town stepped in to help and finished the house in the nick of time. Finally, just 2 weeks before Lizzie was due to deliver their baby boy, moving day was upon them. Maddie had insisted everyone come over to the inn for breakfast. They dined quickly on French toast and crisp bacon and fresh fruit salad and hurried off, anxious to get started on the day. There wasn't much to move from the cottage. What had been salvaged from Lizzie's former life had been put in storage earlier and already been retrieved and taken to the new digs. Lizzie had already packed up their clothes and personal items from the cottage and headed over to her new home, where she was busy ordering men about. "Please be careful with the table, guys. I don't want it scratched." "Yes, ma'am," one of them mumbled. In deference to her condition, no one dared to argue with her. Realizing her power, she gave a slight giggle. She knew they were scared of her. Rubbing her hands over her swollen belly, she nodded. As well they should be. "No, put the recliner there, please, and the sofa over there," she directed. Once the furniture was moved in and the men were busy putting beds together, Lizzie started in the kitchen, putting away new dishes and small appliances and having a grand time playing house. Lisa and Jody were busy hanging curtains, and the girls were running in and out, though staying generally out of trouble. Lizzie was content to let them have their freedom until Daisy and Lily came in crying from a tiny little scrape on Daisy's knee. Lizzie bent down to hug her daughter, using her thumbs to wipe the tears from her dusty cheeks. "My, you sure are dirty," Lizzie said sweetly. "Let Mommy see the boo-boo." "Oh, that's not so bad, is it, sweetie?" She howled, which made Lily cry louder, too. Okay, okay, Mommy will fix it up. Shh, now. You must be tired, huh, Sugar Plum? I guess I need to feed you girls some lunch and put you down for a nap." We'll go back to the cottage for lunch, and I'll fix you up first thing." They howled even louder, loud enough to have Keegan come down the stairs to see what the problem was. "Is everything okay?" he asked, winking at Lizzie and kneeling down in front of the tiny 4-year-olds. Daisy sniffed and drew a ragged breath. "I fell down. Look!" she cried, pointing at the offending knee. "Oh, my, that is bad," Keegan wailed. Oh no, I think we might have to take you to the hospital." He pulled out a cell phone. I'd better call an ambulance." Lily abruptly stopped fussing. Daisy's mouth closed and her eyes grew wide, while Lizzie tried not to giggle. Keegan pretended to punch in the numbers, and he placed the phone against his ear. "I'm okay," Daisy said softly. He pulled the phone away from his ear. "Are you sure? 'Cause I can get the ambulance here in just a few minutes." She rubbed the back of her hand under her drippy nose. "I'm okay. See?" she said, pointing to her knee. He looked closely. "Oh, I guess it's not as bad as I thought." The tiny white-haired angel smiled timorously. Lizzie brushed her hand over Daisy's hair. "They're tired. It's already lunchtime, and the little ones need a nap." Keegan grimaced. "We don't have their beds together yet. It's probably going to be another hour at least." "Well, that's okay. I think I'm going to take them back to the cottage and feed them there and try to get them to lie down." She yawned. "As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to get in a little nap myself." He moved forward and rubbed his hand over the small of her back. "You okay?" She smiled. "If you're asking if I have any contractions, the answer is no. At least not any real ones. A lot of Braxton Hicks, though." "Good. Maybe you can hold off until we're good and settled. Besides, Mom and Dad won't be down until next week." She smiled. "I'll try to hold on. Right now, though, I'm taking the girls to the cottage." He shook his head. "Not alone. Let me see if the guys can do without me." And "No way. You don't leave them for a second. You know how I want things. I'll get Jody and Lisa to keep me company. I'm sure little Jacob and Lena are ready for lunch, too. We'll all go down together. You boys need to take a break soon, too. Don't you worry your little self about us, sweet Elizabeth. We'll be okay. And soon you'll have your new home all set." He wrapped his arms around her from the back and rested his hands on her belly. His head bent and his lips moved over the column of her neck. "I love you," he murmured. "I love you, too." Sighing, she leaned back against his large body. "Thank you, Keegan." He nibbled at her neck. "For what?" "For everything. For coming into my life. For loving me and the girls. For building me this wonderful home." She looked around her. "It's an amazing house, Keegan. Look at this kitchen. It takes up half the first floor. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I'd have a beautiful, state-of-the-art kitchen like this. It's crazy. And the rest of the house is amazing. I mean, 6 bedrooms. What in the world?" "Then you like it?" "I love it. I love you." He came around to stand in front of her and looked deeply into her eyes. "I loved you, Elizabeth, from the moment I laid eyes on you, and then I got to know you, and I really believed you were an angel here on earth. You spoke so sweetly to your girls and to me. You were cheerful even though you had to be exhausted. You smiled even though there wasn't enough to eat. And when I selfishly wanted you, you gave yourself to me wholeheartedly and with so much passion. You blew me away. Every day, baby. I'm grateful for you." Raising her chin with his finger, he leaned down and gently kissed her. Smiling, he lifted his head and stepped away. "Okay, got to get done. Go rest. I'll see you in a few hours, and take the women with you." Lizzie gathered her forces. Jody and Lisa were definitely looking forward to a break, but decided that Lisa would take Jacob and Lena to the inn and feed them and put them down for a nap there, since the cottage was so small. Lizzie, Jody, and the girls made their way back to the cottage. "I can't thank you and Lisa enough," Lizzie said as she spread slices of bread out on the counter. "For what? Are you being silly again?" Jody answered with a laugh. "We do what we want to do. I love dressing windows. Lisa loves anything to do with fixing up a place, be it home or hotel. We're having a blast. Besides, you're about to have a baby any time now. We want to make everything perfect for you and your little one. You're the best friends anyone could have. You're the closest friends I've ever had." "Well, I find that hard to believe. Weren't you like a cheerleader in high school? I'm sure you had lots of friends." Lizzie shrugged as she scooped peanut butter out of a jar. "I never did fit in. I only tried out because Bradley was the big, popular captain of the football team, and he said I should. So I did. Believe me, no one was more surprised than me when I made the squad. Our senior year, I was even voted homecoming queen. I'm not stupid, though. I realized it was only because of him and the pull he and his family had on everyone else. Still, even as one of the elite, the girls never really accepted me. I went to all the parties because I was Bradley's girlfriend. Otherwise, I would never have been invited. She sighed. But he loved me. That was real. He was a good man. Jody smiled. So, how lucky are you to have been given two wonderful men in a lifetime? Pretty lucky, Lizzie agreed. Mommy, you said you'd fix my knee first thing, Daisy complained. Lizzie looked down at Daisy and her twin Lily. Daisy's indignant expression said it all. Lily's was one of horror. Lily had always felt the pain of her sister. Lizzie thought that possibly Lily's empathic tendencies acted as a magnifier, because she was usually more upset than Daisy herself about anything Daisy suffered, from a stubbed toe to a sore throat. Thank goodness Daisy had never been hurt badly. Oh, I did promise that, didn't I? I'll finish the sandwiches, Jody volunteered. You play nurse. She took her daughter's hand and led her to a dining room chair. Sit right here and I'll get the Band-Aid, she said. When she heard Lily sniff, she peered down at her daughter. You want a Band-Aid too, sweetie? Lily shook her head. Well, then what is it, baby? You just worried about Daisy? Lily nodded. Heather, Lizzie called, please come and get Lily and take her to sit on the front steps, and she bent close to whisper, and keep her occupied until I fix up Daisy's knee, okay? Heather smiled conspiratorially as she held her hand out to Lily. After all, Heather was now a very grown-up 6-year-old. They went out the front door. Smiling, Lizzie made quick work of cleaning the small scrape on Daisy's knee and securing it with a SpongeBob Band-Aid. She just helped Daisy down off the chair and turned to help Jody get the sandwiches to the table when Heather came back inside, her eyes wide. Mommy, there's a man outside, and I don't know him. He's trying to talk to me, and Lily won't come in. Lizzie froze. A man? Her heart leapt into her throat. She rushed toward the door, Jody right behind her. What she saw had terror ripping through her body. Dennis Hanley, her would-be rapist, held Lily's hand and was walking her toward the parking area. Jody rushed past her and burst out the door. Lizzie reached into her pocket for her cell phone and realized she'd left it at the new house. She dashed for the house phone, but realized she didn't know anyone's number, not even her new home number. She knelt down quickly in front of Heather. Listen, baby, this is an emergency. Run as fast as you can to Daddy and tell him the bad man is here. Run, baby. Don't stop. She turned to Rose and Violet and Daisy. Stay in this house. Do not come out this door. Lizzie and Heather both exploded from the little cottage. Heather headed toward the new house. Lizzie headed to where Jody stood braced and ready as Hanley faced off with her. You're not taking her anywhere, Jody was saying. I don't know who you think you are, you skinny little. I'm the woman who's going to kick your butt, she said calmly. Lizzie swallowed. She knew Jody was trying to entice him to fight with her. Then he'd have to let go of Lily's hand. And to Lizzie's surprise, he did. Lizzie inched her way around toward Lily. Come on, buddy. Let's see what you got, Jody said, egging him on. 2 times you tried to rape my friend. I'm thinking you failed because you couldn't get it up. The man's eyes blazed hatred. He advanced towards Jody, and Lizzie made her way closer to Lily. Hanley swung at Jody's head, and she ducked and punched him in the face. Twice. Just a few more feet, and she'd have Lily in her arms. New scene. Daddy! Heather started shouting as she neared the house and could see the men standing on the front porch. Daddy! She cried. Keegan stopped laughing at something Chad had said when he heard the cry. He rushed down the steps to meet the hysterical girl. What is it, baby? Is it Mommy? Heather's head was bobbing up and down. The man, she gasped. The bad man. Keegan didn't wait for her to finish. She started running, and John right behind, and Chaz grabbed Heather and took off. New scene. Jody laughed at the man. His nose was bleeding. You're going down, she taunted, hoping that fighting her would keep him occupied long enough for the men to get here. He'd gotten in a few punches. Still, she needed to keep it up. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw that Lizzie had hold of Lily and was dragging her to the side. Go inside, Jody yelled. Lizzie shook her head. I'm not leaving you. Jody didn't waste time arguing because she would have said the same thing to Lizzie. She turned back to Hanley. Is that the best you can do? Suddenly he stopped and smiled. No, I can do this. He drew a gun from his waistband and pointed it at Jody. Her eyes zeroed in on his finger as his muscles tensed to pull the trigger. Lizzie screamed. Jody kicked out hard and fast, connecting with his wrist. The gun went off and Jody went down. Hanley moved so quickly. He had Lizzie in his grasp. In less than a second, jerking her around toward him, he reached toward Lily. "No!" Lizzie screamed, struggling to pull away from him. Stomping on his toe seemed to have no effect. The man wrapped his arm around the small of Lizzie's back, pulling her and Lily up against his body. "Sorry, babe, but it's not you I want anymore. I mean, look at you. You're big as a cow," he said, motioning to her belly. "But—" He jerked on Lily's arm. "I'll take the kid." Lily screamed in pain as his fingers dug into her tender skin. Lizzie grasped his wrist, trying to pry it from her daughter's arm. He slapped her with his free hand, but she didn't let that stop her from trying to pry his fingers from Lily. He leaned close to Lizzie's ear. "Let go, Lizzie girl," he said softly. Her stomach lurched, and she shook her head madly. "You know, I thought about waiting around for the kid to be born and taking it. Brian would have loved that. But I've run out of time, so I'm taking this one." Lizzie snarled like a lioness, grabbing his hair and pulling hard, causing his head to bend to the side. "You're not taking her anywhere." "Oh, but I am," he growled. "Now let go." "No, never." Notwithstanding, when he placed his large boot of foot against her abdomen and kicked, she flew backward. Lily screamed as he scooped her up and carried her toward the parking lot. New scene. They could see what was happening as they topped the small hill. They saw Jody fighting with the man. They heard the gunshot and saw Jody go down. Keegan didn't take time to look back at John, but understood the terror he must be feeling. They saw Hanley grappling with Lizzie, and then Lizzie went down. They saw her rise again and run after Hanley, who'd reached his car and tossed the child inside. Lizzie ran at the car and jumped toward the driver's side window. He slammed the car in reverse and backed up, tires squealing, Lizzie hanging out of the window. The car was thrown into gear. Keegan was flying across the yard. Lizzie was screaming. Hanley's fist plowed into her face just as he floored it. Lizzie landed hard on the pavement and rolled away, then came up again, attempting to run after the car. She saw Keegan and pointed at the car. "He has Lily! He has Lily!" Keegan had no time to waste. If he saw to Elizabeth, Lily could possibly be gone forever. He dove into his car and screeched out of the parking lot. Pain. There was so much pain. Lizzie swayed and sunk to her knees, her eyes taking in the scene as if she were seeing it through the lens of a camera. John had Jody cradled in his arms, his ear pressed to her chest. Heather stood by the front steps crying. 3 little faces peered out the window of the cottage. Chaz was running toward her. Lizzie looked up at him as he knelt beside her. "Is Jody—" "She's going to be fine." The bullet grazed her head. The tears came. She tried to get up, but Chaz pushed her back down. She gripped his hand. "Lily's gone," she cried. "Keegan will get her back. He won't get out of the county. I've called Tyson. All roads are closed." "He'll get her," she whimpered, needing to be reassured. "He will," Chaz said. Lizzie struggled to get to her feet. "I've got to see about Jody." He held her down. You're not going anywhere." "But—" Chaz shook his head at her and then glanced down toward the ground. Lizzie followed the direction of her eyes. She was sitting in a puddle of blood and what was probably amniotic fluid. Lisa arrived with several blankets. "Maddie's taking the girls to the inn, and ambulances are on the way," she said softly as she knelt by Lizzie. She reached out and touched Lizzie's battered, bloody face. "Hey, tell us what you're feeling, okay?" "He took Lily," she whispered. "I know, hun, but Keegan will get her back. I trust him to do that, don't you?" Lizzie thought for only a second. "Yes." "Right now you have to take care of this baby for him, okay?" Lisa said gently. Lizzie nodded. "Think now. Are you in any pain?" She shook her head. "No. No more pain. I just feel pressure. Lots of pressure." Her eyes opened wide. "Oh! Oh no, that means the baby's coming." Chaz took over. "Lizzie, you know I used to be a paramedic, so I want you to trust me, okay?" She nodded and gave a hysterical laugh. "I used to be a nurse, but I can't remember anything right now." He chuckled with her, hoping to ease the tension in the air. They'd all give anything right now to see Keegan come driving back into the lot, getting out of the car with Lily in tow. John carried Jody, who was now conscious, over to Lizzie with the promise that she would lie down beside her and wait for the ambulance. Once they arrived at Lizzie's side, they realized they were about to witness the birth of one tiny little Gabriel Tanner. Chaz and John helped ease Lizzie down onto a blanket, while Lisa spread out another blanket beside Lizzie for Jody. Jody reached over and took Lizzie's hand. Suddenly, Lizzie let out a loud groan. "Lizzie, I've got to see if the baby's crowning, okay? Chaz said. Lizzie nodded as Chaz removed her torn and bloody clothing. Lisa draped another blanket over Lizzie's knees as Chaz examined her, and he looked up, his eyes meeting John's. He's right there. He's not going to wait. New scene. Keegan reached for the glove compartment and pulled out his gun. Why, he didn't know. He couldn't shoot out the tires. Lily was in the car, and it's not as if the guy had strapped her into a car seat. Maneuvering around the light traffic on the highway that led out of town had been easy enough. He had the late model Caddy in his sights. No way was he going to lose it. His mind flashed briefly to the scene of destruction he'd left behind. Dear Father, please let Jody survive, he thought. Lizzie appeared shaken but okay. He hoped that was true. Refocusing on the task at hand, he gunned his engine and moved closer to the car. Glancing ahead, though, he saw the roadblock. Apparently, so did Hanley, and the caddy took a sharp left onto a dirt road. Keegan smiled. He had him now, for sure. The caddy went right, and Keegan had no idea where they were headed, but he figured Hanley didn't either. For all he knew, they would go flying off a cliff any moment. The dips and gullies in the dirt road were throwing both cars around in a crazy, haphazard fashion. Keegan's jaw tensed as he imagined little Lily being thrown around in the car. And then, it wasn't a cliff, but it still brought them both to a sudden stop. A steel gate barred the road, one similar to the one Chaz used to block off the road when he run his cattle a few months ago. Apparently, Hanley thought he'd be able to run through it. The car had come to an abrupt halt, the airbags deployed. Keegan prayed Lily was okay as he sprang from his car. In horror, he watched as Hanley's door swung open and he tumbled out of the car, landing on his backside, his fist balled in the back of Lily's shirt. He held a gun against Lily's head, and Keegan swallowed hard. Lily wasn't moving. Her body hung limply in the air, flopping around like a rag doll when Hanley shook her in his rage. I'll kill her, he warned. Keegan's gun pointed toward the man. The stillness came over him, the one that had always came over him when he turned himself over to instinct. At that moment, 4 cop cars raced into the clearing, skidding to a halt. Their doors flew open, and suddenly 7 more men had their guns trained on Dennis Hanley. Sheriff Tyson Stewart moved slowly up to join Keegan where he took cover behind the door of his car. She looks like she's already dead, Keegan answered Hanley's statement calmly. Tyson glanced at Keegan. He'd gotten to know the man. He'd heard all the stories. He knew he had to trust everything he did and said now. Tyson had no experience with something like this. Hanley shook the child and she moaned softly. Not yet, Tanner. It's all up to you. Have you got the shot? Tyson murmured. I've got it. I'm just waiting for him to move the gun away from Lily's head. Just a fraction of an inch is all I need. Or I need him to look away for a second. 1 second. Lily started to cry, and Keegan pushed the sound out of his head and drew a breath. I'm warning you right now, Hanley. Drop the gun and put the girl down, or you die. That's the only warning you're going to get. No, you drop your gun, Tanner, or she dies. Well, that's not going to happen. You should know by now. I don't put my weapon down. Listen, Hanley, I'm going to be fair and tell you that I really want to kill you. I'm really hoping you don't comply. It will make me just glow all over to get the chance to blow your freaking head off. So please, Hanley, do me a favor and make me have to do it. Tyson watched as the man swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He glanced over at Keegan. His gun never wavered. His eyes were sharp, piercing, zeroing in on his prey. Tyson had no doubt that Hanley would soon have one of those black holes right in the middle of his forehead, like so many others who'd crossed this man. They waited 10, 20 seconds, and then, miraculously, the man's face crumpled. Keegan tensed. Then Hanley carefully set Lily on the ground, and the gun he held pointed in the air. Good decision, Keegan said. Now hold the gun by the barrel. The man complied. Place the gun on the ground, the barrel facing you, Keegan ordered, as he moved from his place of cover and headed toward Hanley. Tyson held his breath, worried the man would try something at the last minute, but it didn't happen. Within seconds, the cops had Hanley on the ground, searched and cuffed, and Keegan held Lily in his arms. He looked her over. She had a large bump on her forehead, but that was the only injury he could see. Hey, baby girl, he said to her softly. She buried her face against his chest. New scene. You're not breathing, Jody complained. Breathe, girl. I'm trying, Lizzie sobbed. Did I say I wasn't in pain? I was mistaken. It hurts so bad. Jody lay beside her on a blanket in the parking lot where Lizzie had collapsed. She could feel the heat from the asphalt seeping up through the blanket, but she ignored it and squeezed Lizzie's hand. You can do this, Lizzie. Lizzie looked at her friend. I want Keegan and Lily. I'm so scared. I know, sweetie. I know. Lizzie, the baby is right here. I'm a little worried about him. Let's go ahead and push him out, okay? Chaz said, his voice gentle. With the next contraction, I want you to push. He looked up as John came back from the house with towels. John, get behind her and help her to sit up a little. John did as ordered. The contraction came. Lizzie drew a breath and screamed as the pain tore through her. Oh, I want Keegan, she cried. There we go. You did it, Lizzie. One more push. One more. The baby's head appeared as Lizzie bore down, her voice a feral growl. I hear the ambulance, Lisa said. Well, they took their sweet time, Chaz complained. The next contraction came, and Chaz caught the baby boy in a large towel. They all breathed a sigh of relief as a child howled loudly. Lizzie began to cry as Chaz wrapped the little boy and placed him on his mother's chest, just as two ambulances pulled up. Chaz stepped out of the way as the medics knelt down to take care of their patients. And then the miracle they'd all been praying for happened. Keegan's car pulled through the inn's entrance, escorted by Tyson in his sheriff's car. There wasn't a dry eye around as Keegan made his way toward his wife, holding a beautiful angel girl in his arms. New scene. When Keegan entered the hospital waiting room, he was taken aback. The room was full of people waiting for news that Lizzie, Gabriel, and Lily had been given a clean bill of health. Before he answered any questions, he knelt down to put his arms around the four little girls who'd been waiting patiently to see their mom and sister and new brother. The girls, still feeling traumatized by what they'd witnessed, leaned against him, obviously needing his reassurance. Keegan spoke quietly to them. Mommy is fine, angels. I'm here to take you back to her room now. Heather sniffed. What about Lily? She's doing good, really, you'll see. Is the baby out of Mommy's tummy now? Rose asked. He's out, and he can't wait to meet his sisters. Hold on just a second, and I'll take you back. He rose and eyed the rest of the crowd. They're all doing great, he said in answer to the inquiries that flew at him. Elizabeth looks a little worse for wear, but she's going to be okay. They did a scan on Lily, and she's fine. There's a big bump on her head. She has some bruises on her arms and legs, but she's good. Gabriel is... He stopped and had to get control of his emotions. He's perfect, he smiled. I have a son. John clapped him on the back as Jody rose and hugged him. Keegan held her out at arm's length to scrutinize her face. You're okay? She nodded. They scanned me too. I'm good. She has a concussion, John corrected, but she wouldn't let me take her home to rest until she made sure your family was good. Keegan smiled down at her. What you did, Jody. I mean, hell. He looked away, then back at the small woman. You saved their lives, you know. Lily's for sure. If you hadn't fought with him, he would have been long gone with her. I can't thank you enough, he said, his voice rough with emotion. She's quite a girl, John said, pulling his wife tightly against his side. I agree. Oh, stop, you guys. I'll say the same thing you always say. I did what I had to do. No biggie. I was taught by the best. Keegan glanced at John. I'll agree to that. John laughed. She's not talking about me. She's talking about Grandmaster Keno. That's where we met, you know, in one of Grandmaster Keno's classes. Daddy, can we go now? Rose said, her voice clearly showing her irritation. He laughed. Absolutely. He looked over at the others in the room. Chaz, who'd safely delivered his son, and Lisa, who'd refused to leave Lizzie's side. Miss Maddie, who comforted the children, and Chaz's brother Tyson. And then there was Lisa's father Joe, and stepmother Shirley, and sister Megan, and several others from the small town. Keegan nodded his head at the group at large. Thank you, everyone, from the bottom of my heart for your love and support. Our pleasure, Lisa's father Joe spoke for them. We're all family. That's how it is in our town. We take care of each other. Besides, we like having a real hero living in our town. Keegan looked around. It seems to me you have a town full of heroes. He tugged on Daisy's hand. Come on, girls. Your beautiful mom is anxious to see you. That is the end of chapter 18. And now for the epilogue. 4 months later. She'd thought after the birth of their child that their attraction to each other would cool or at least level out, but every time he touched her, she wanted him. Their eyes closed as they slipped into that floating place that is half earthbound and half spirit as they came together as one. Their union was so much more than sexual. It was spiritual. It was beautiful, and Lizzie could not hold back the flood of emotion that brought on the tears. Hey, are you okay? She shook her head. What is it, Elizabeth? She sniffed. I don't know. You're the one with the psychology degree. You tell me. Gathering he close, Gathering her close, he leaned his head back on the pillow and stared at the ceiling. Okay, he sighed. Well, it's a criminal psychology degree, but I'll give it a shot. Let's see. His finger stroked her cheek as he thought. Sex, he said, can be an emotional release as much as a physical one, especially for women. Or probably mainly for women, he amended. So I'm thinking the tears are an emotional release. Now, since we're not really under any stress or strain, at least that I know of, I'm going to assume that emotional release is a happy one. He rubbed her arm. How am I doing? Pretty good so far, she said with a sweet smile. Okay. Well, then, since this release is a happy one, I'm going to venture you were crying tears of joy because we're like the happiest family in the world. She giggled. We are. But do you think we'll ever get tired of each other? Do you think you'll ever get tired of making love to me? I can't imagine that. I remember thinking if I could just have you one time, then maybe the fever would die down. But it only got worse. Then I thought maybe after we're married, I'll be able to settle down and not want you and think about you every second of the day. But it hasn't gotten any better. I love you with all my heart. I want you with every fiber of my being. I don't think that's going to change, at least not for the next 100 years. After that, we'll just have to see. Well, I worry about you going out to California, she said softly. Air travel is safe, Lisbeth. I'm talking about what you're going to do out there. You mean fight in the Keno Challenge? Don't worry. I've asked Rick to go easy on me, he joked. I'm serious, Keegan. Well, thanks for having faith in me, he complained. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Why do you guys have to do this anyway? Well, Rick wants to retire from fighting in the challenge, and he wants to go out with a bang. He asked me to fight because he wants to capitalize on the publicity that surrounded me this past year. He thinks me fighting is a big draw, and that'll mean more money for the charities. Why is he retiring? He's only like 30, right? He's 34, and it's taking a toll on his body. The Keno Challenge is brutal, and he has other avenues he wants to travel. Well, that's understandable, I guess. I just wish you didn't have to leave. I'll only be gone a week before you and the kids join me out there, he said. His eyes dropped to her mouth as she chewed on her lower lip, and suddenly he realized, I haven't been away from you since the time I went to D.C., huh? Her eyes met his. Are you afraid, Elizabeth? Sighing, she gave a shrug. I know it's all over, but I may be feeling a little apprehensive. He ran the back of his knuckles over her cheek. John and the guys are coming out there with me to help me train so I don't die, he chuckled. But Chaz will be here. Of course, he's not always nearby. I could bring Aaron in as your bodyguard while I'm gone. How would that be? Lizzie thought about the agent Keegan had been training as his assistant. He'd been over to the house for dinner several times and had that little brother kind of thing going. She smiled and nodded at her husband. That would help. Do you mind? Of course I don't mind. I love you, and I'll always take care of your needs. She smiled provocatively. Well, then do it. Yes, ma'am. Next scene. Early November. Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. Ricky Keno held an ice pack to his nose as he lounged back on the giant sofa at his home on the beach just south of his father's home where he'd grown up. On either side of him and dispersed throughout the room were some of his closest friends, including Steve Reynolds, a PI and confidant to Rick for years, and Toby Nash, the country singing sensation. Keegan sat across from Ricky, holding his own pack against his eye. He was flanked by Braden on one side and Tristan on the other, and Caleb sitting on the arm of the couch, and Keegan's friends lovingly tormented him, teasing him about losing to Ricky. You know what your problem was? Braden said. Well, I have a feeling you're going to fill me in, Keegan answered. You couldn't figure out a way to beat him without killing him. The others laughed, and Keegan rolled his eyes. I guess it's a good thing he likes me, Ricky said, even though my nose doesn't think so. Well, at least it's not broken, Tristan said. Your nose is no worse than my eye, Keegan complained. Come on, buddy, Caleb prodded. You need a rematch. It was too close. No freaking way, Ricky laughed. The guys continued to razz each other as the rest of the crowd munched on goodies and settled into their own conversations. The giant room was filled with family and friends and children, most of who belonged to Keegan and Lizzie. Most of whom belonged to Keegan and Lizzie. Brianna, Rick's gorgeous and newly pregnant movie star wife, sat curled up on a large sofa that sat in front of a huge picture window, offering a view of the ocean. Her son, Eric III, who would be 3 in a few months, slept soundly in her lap. Bree spoke quietly with Lizzie, who sat next to her, discreetly nursing little Gabriel under a receiving blanket over her shoulder. On Lizzie's other side sat Shelley Keno, Brianna's mother, who was married to Ricky's father, Eric. And next to Shelley, Jason's wife, and Shelley's best friend, Angel, chatted about the events of the night. The Keno challenge had been a great success, as usual. Ricky now limited himself to only 3 bouts, but so the public would get their money's worth, a young up-and-coming martial artist fought the 2 earlier bouts. This year, that young man happened to be none other than Joey Adams, Bree's fresh-faced, brown-eyed youngest brother, who'd been trained by Grandmaster Keno and Ricky since he was 6 years old. He was now 20, and following nicely in Ricky's footsteps. Joey won both his bouts. He'd appeared in some of Ricky's earlier films, first as a stunt artist and followed by a couple of small supporting roles. Recently, he'd played the younger, victimized brother of a serial killer. This being his second showing at the Keno Challenge, he was growing in popularity and was currently working on a pilot for a series about the FBI. Joey stood off in a corner on his cell, getting the scoop from his older brother Mark, who hadn't been able to make the Keno Challenge. Mark attended the University of Hawaii on a football scholarship and had been the starting quarterback since his sophomore year. The Keno Challenge had been the one Saturday each year the Marks family had missed his game. Joey was getting the stats from his brother that Mark had thrown for 298 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also in the room was Keegan's buddy, John Apple, a former student of Grandmaster Keno. He stood off to the side with Jason Lee and Jason's brother, attorney Justin Lee, and Justin's new wife, Lori, whom Justin met back when Brianna had been shot by one of Eric's old enemies. Lori had been one of the nurses who'd cared for Bree. Lori and Lizzie had already spent hours sharing their experiences. Ricky's father, Grandmaster Eric Keno, sat in a large overstuffed chair, busy playing Grandpa to the slew of children over in the corner of the room. The children included Lizzie's 5 girls, Mark's son, Joey, who was now 3, almost 7-year-old Grace, daughter of Toby and Caroline, 9-year-old Kimmy, the daughter of Jason and Angel, and finally 11-year-old Jeffy, the daughter of Shelley and Eric, whose real name is Juneflower. Jody Apple sat on the floor near the children, holding her son Jake as he slept. Caroline sat next to her, holding on to her rambunctious 3-year-old Brody. Jeffy held almost 4-year-old Daisy on her lap, while her twin Lily nestled in Eric's arms. On Eric's other knee, little Joey sat quietly, always patient and still. Kimmy, trying as usual to imitate Jeffy, coaxed 5-year-old Violet into her lap, while Rose and Heather sat cross-legged on the floor, listening in rapt attention as Eric told them his version of the 3 little pigs. Shelley glanced over at her husband, surrounded by the children, and smiled. There was something about his voice that caused all who heard it to stop and listen. He wasn't loud. Actually, he was quite soft-spoken, yet he held the children's attention completely. As long as she knew him, it'd been like that. His students, his son and daughter, her sons and daughters, her friends, the media, a crowd of people, even other masters such as him, all stopped and listened whenever he opened his mouth, like something out of an old Merrill Lynch commercial. Her eyes met his, and he smiled at her. "Everything okay, Shelley girl?" he asked softly. The room quieted, which proved the thoughts she'd just been thinking. "Everything's wonderful," she answered. "I was just thinking what a wonderful group of family and friends we have. We're so blessed. He bent his head to kiss the top of Lily's head. I agree. Our family, our old friends, and our new friends continue to grow. He nodded at Ricky. When Rick brought my attention to Keegan's heroism last year and his plight, I could tell Rick was impressed. So it doesn't surprise me that Keegan and his beautiful family are suddenly a part of our world. And I have to say, I couldn't be gladder, if only for the opportunity to look at these angelic little ones and feel their sweet spirits. Of course, that has something to do with the woman that raised them, he added, smiling at Lizzie. You are a lucky man, Keegan. Oh, I know that only too well, Keegan said. Meeting Lizzie and the girls is the best thing that ever happened to me, and I swear I'm grateful every moment of the day. Hold it, everyone, Jeff said. He'd been circling the room, handing out glasses and filling them with champagne. You guys are using up all the things I was going to say in my toast. Eric chuckled. Sorry about that. You go right ahead. The room is yours. Jeff nodded. Thank you, sir. He looked over the room and sighed. What he said, he joked, nodding at Eric. The crowd laughed. No, really, I'd like to take this opportunity to honor and congratulate Ricky. This makes 5 Keno challenges he's dominated. One fight is tough. When he started this whole thing to prove a point to some paparazzo dude, he fought 5 times in one night, unheard of, and he won. Truly amazing. Well, one was a disqualification, Joey put in with a grin. Ricky pointed at Joey. Hey, I fought him first, before he was disqualified. Children, Jeff stated firmly. As I was saying, since then, even though he's only fighting 3 fights now, he's still kicking at, excuse me, kids, Jeff said, nodding toward the now giggling group. He's still kicking butt. Anyway, I wanted to take this opportunity to honor him. He held his glass high. To you, Rick. Hear, hear, the rest chimed and sipped their drink. And before I turn the floor over to anyone else, I've got 2 more people I want to recognize, if that's okay. You go ahead, Jeff, Bree said. The floor is all yours for as long as you want it. Jeff grinned. Thanks, Bree. Ever since she drugged him on the beach a few years earlier, she would do anything to make it up to him. He thought it was funny, and admittedly sometimes took advantage of it. So I also wanted to honor Joey, who's been stepping into Ricky's footsteps pretty darn well. Like I said, one fight is tough, and for the last 2 challenges, Joey's been fighting 2 fights and winning, even though that last one tonight was close. Joey grinned and shrugged. Final score is all that counts. Jeff raised his glass. To you, little Joe, you have my respect. Absolutely, Ricky said loudly. I'm proud of you, bro. The rest echoed the adulation and raised their glasses and drank. Thanks, Joey said, but all credit goes back to my teachers. No one argued with that, and the group grew quiet, waiting to hear Jeff's last accolade. Jeff swallowed hard, finding he had to clear the lump in his throat. This last one goes to another competitor in the Keno Challenge tonight. As one, all eyes swung to Keegan, whose face reddened and jaw tightened. To me, Keeg, you are the man. You may have lost your bout tonight, and who better to lose to than Rick? But anyway, to me, you are my hero. I think everyone here appreciates what you were willing to give for the kids last year, and you stayed strong even when it seems your country didn't appreciate your efforts. And what got you into all that trouble was you trying to get to me. You risked your life. You risked everything to... His voice broke. Blinking hard, he went on. You risked your own life to save mine, a man you barely knew, and I will always be grateful to you. He held his glass high. To you, Keegan Tanner, you are my hero. To Keegan, John echoed. To Keegan, the rest joined. Eric cleared his throat, and the room quieted immediately. I would add my best wishes, Keegan, but before I do, I need to tell you all what God has just placed on my heart. My life thus far has been an amazing journey. I had no idea 40-something years ago that the significance of falling through the earth and being trapped in a cave and being visited by an angel while in that cave, what significance that would have. Several in the room were stunned by that information, and Ricky was not stunned by the information, but was stunned that his father was sharing it, making him realize this was an important moment. Since that time in the cave, I've somehow stumbled down the correct path. God was leading me, and at times I became frustrated because even though God has a plan, he didn't seem willing to share that plan with me. He only showed me the next step. It was up to me to take that step in faith, not knowing the plan, but knowing God and trusting Him. Shelley peered around the room. As always, her husband had everyone's rapt attention. Even the children were quiet, their little angel faces glowing with light. The good Lord, Eric went on, has just put on my heart that He not only brought me down a path that led to this moment, but He brought all of you. His plan is vast, it is large, and it has many pieces, and each of you are important to His plan. He just told me that. He just filled my heart with that. His spirit is so strong right now, I feel like I might burst. The others in the room felt it too, for many of them had tears coursing down their cheeks, and Shelley looked around again. It was a habit of hers to look around as her husband spoke, to see how what he had to say affected others. She saw that even the men had tears, and she realized that a man unashamed of how the Spirit of God touches them, that is a beautiful thing. It is the most masculine thing, she thought, to see these men allow God to touch them, and she thought she also might burst with the immense love she suddenly felt for every single person in the room. There's more, Eric went on. There's a lot more to come. There are more coming to join our ranks. God is amassing an army of warriors such as yourselves, men and women. Many here have been through a refiner's fire, and many of you will in the future. And when that happens, and it will, hold firm in your faith. God has a plan. We may not be able to see the entire path He has us on, but we can see one or two steps in front of us. Take those steps. Each of you are warriors, all of you, right down to this very special newest edition. He motioned toward tiny Gabriel Tanner. Keegan, may you and your sweet wife Lizzie and all your beautiful children be happy and safe and strong, and may life for you and your family be heaven on earth. Amen, Shelley said softly. Thank you, Keegan said as he smiled at Lizzie across the room. Her face glowed radiant as she smiled back at him, and even though he couldn't see him, he knew his son's head lay nestled against her breast. His eyes swept the room, taking in the 5 blonde little girls who truly seemed to have halos of light around their heads. Life is heaven on earth, he thought, and I'm living amongst a whole flock of angels. And that is the end of Book 5.